think there is a movement of people starting to see that?
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, the other really interesting thing that's happening is that in the most unexpected place of it at all, which is people who, having rejected the faith, realize there's a kind of magic and enchantment and beauty in the world, and have returned to the old paganisms, the kind of neo-pagans, and people who kind of go on long, treks in the wilderness or live in yurts or, do what people call tree hugging. I think there's nothing wrong with tree hugging. But anyway, quite a number of people from that world are, curious enough, coming to Christ. I'm in long conversation at the moment with an extraordinary guy called Martin Shaw, has a huge sort of Substack following in the kind of, and he's one of the great storytellers in the tradition of sort of Robert Bly and kind of Iron John, and these old folk tales are really about our inner life kind of thing. Mm. And he has quite literally been visited by Christ. I mean, he had these dreams of a great stag coming in with its antlers, but with a cross, coming in and wrecking his house. And then, he felt a light coming from heaven. And he's what he calls the mossy-faced Christ. He realized that the deepest truth he'd always been looking for, unexpectedly, was Christ himself in and through and loving his creation. And, he's been baptized now. And, then Paul Kingsnorth is another example. There's all kinds of people who are kind of coming to faith because they've looked deeply enough into something else to know what depths they are. And because also Christ is the fulfiller of things, here's one greater than Solomon is here, but one greater than Apollo is here, one greater than Pan is here, but not less than Apollo and Pan. And people who loved Apollo or Pan can find all that was best in that in Christ, as Paul says, he whom you worship without knowing, him I preach. Now, Paul could only say that because he said to the Athenians, men of Athens, as I walked through, I observed the objects of wish. I see that you are very religious. He whom you worship without knowing. He didn't say, you're a bunch of dirty pagans who aren't kosher, sod you. Which is actually, Luke tells us that's how he felt when he actually arrived at Athens. But he overcame that, and he really looked, and he really listened. And he goes on to say, as you remember in that great speech in Acts, some of your own poets have said, we are his children, in him we live and move and have our being. That's pagan Greek poetry he's quoting there. In fact, now, I think there's beginning to be enough Christians with enough confidence in their faith to really know and love pagans and recognize that actually pagans are a lot closer to Christ than mere materialists. After all, the gospel was eventually spread through Europe in an entirely religiously active pagan world. And in a sense, they had enough of the language to get it. And I rather rejoice in the fact that scientific materialism is collapsing on every side. Some people, when it collapses, become Christians. Hallelujah. Some people become neo-pagans, but that doesn't trouble me at all. I think that may be a proper stepping stage on the journey to faith. In fact, there's a poem by C.S. Lewis about exactly that, called A Cliche Come Out of Its Cage. The cliche being the world's gone back to paganism. And basically that poem says, if only, like that would be a way better starting place, than where we are now. And I think that's starting to happen.